Welcome to Make You Remarkable, brought to you by Oconee State Bank, the podcast that's all about unleashing your inner leader and making an impact on your community. Get ready for a wild ride of inspiration, education, and a whole lot of fun. Each week, we sit down with local legends, business owners, and influential minds to talk about their journey, their impact, and the secrets behind their incredible success. This is not your ordinary bank podcast. We're here to bring the energy, the laughs, and the aha moments that'll leave you itching to conquer the world. Now get ready to make your remarkable with your host, JT Tomlin.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Make You Remarkable, hosted by Oconee State Bank. I'm JT Tomlin, and today I'm joined with Chris Greer. Chris is an award-winning photographer and author of the best-selling travel guide, Georgia Discovered, as well as his newest book, Naturally Georgia. He also produces and hosts Viewfinders, a television show broadcasted nationally on PBS that centers around two photographers, Chris Greer and Paul Daniel, looking for the most beautiful locations in the world to photograph. Viewfinders is an Emmy-nominated television series. Season 3 is currently in production and will be released in spring of 2025. Chris, I'm so glad that you're here today, and I'm really excited to get to talk about all this.
Thank you, JT. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, and I spent the first 18 years of my life there. After a while, I decided I need a change of scenery, need to go someplace else. Didn't want to go to college in the state of Tennessee, so I went up to Indiana and attended Indiana University. Majored in biology. I got a BS in biology, and I'm not really using it that much nowadays, but that's okay. It was a great experience. Really enjoyed my time there. Towards the end of my program, I needed a job, and I got a job on campus as a student computer consultant, which didn't pay well, but it was on campus. They needed cheap labor to keep all the labs running. It was in the beginning days of fast internet and a lot of web content starting to make its way out there, and I just found it all fascinating. And I shifted to computers, and I went to University of Memphis, returned back home to where I was born and raised, and started my master's degree there in instructional design and technology. Finished up, moved to Knoxville, started working for a company there, decided I just didn't really see a good fit there. I kind of missed the university setting. And so I went to University of Tennessee, and I was looking for a job in instructional technology, but they had nothing available other than their doc program. They had openings there. So I applied for it and started my doctorate degree. And I say all that because I'm a professor. That's my first job. I'm at Georgia College down in Milledgeville, and it's been a wonderful experience for me. But I've always had a creative streak, and it started from a young age. And so when I was doing my master's, when I was doing my doctorate, I took as many courses out of the art department as they would let me, as they would allow me to count towards my degree. And so I did a lot of media art. I did graphic design. I did flash animation back when that was a thing.
Wow.
I did video production, digital photography, all of those things, because I enjoyed them immensely. And there is some overlap in instructional technology with those. But it kind of kept that fire burning that I've had from a young age when it comes to creating content, and especially the visual arts. Once I finished my doctorate, I came to Georgia College in Milledgeville, and I never left. Lived in Milledgeville for a while. My wife and I moved there. Were there for 10 years. And then started having kids, and Oconee schools are very well regarded for good reason. And I was in the position where I didn't have to be on campus all of the time. And so that commute was doable for me. And so we moved here to Oconee County about 10 years ago.
So what got you into photography? How did you go from, professor to photographer?
That's a good question. When I was 12, my dad has always been a photographer from a very young age, and he shot film. He traveled the world. He has incredible photographs from Africa to Asia to North and South America. I mean, really everywhere. And so he was taking photos a lot when I was growing up, and I expressed an interest in it when I was around 12, and he gave me one of his old camera bodies. I still remember it was a Pentax K1000, fully manual camera, and gave me some rolls of film. and started teaching me the basics, what a shutter speed is, what an aperture is, what the ISO rating is on film, how all of that works together to craft images that look good and that are exposed correctly. And of course, that was back in the day of film and waiting for the film to be developed and seeing what you got. And all of it costs a fair amount of money, especially when you're young. But I enjoyed it a lot. And I took a lot of pictures back then. And it's kind of ebbed and flowed over the years. But as a professor, I would incorporate a lot of visual arts into my courses as much as possible, especially because instructional technology, at least the way I teach it and our focus in the College of Ed, is using it for P-12 education and also graduate level education. And so there is a visual component to a lot of that, especially nowadays with the proliferation of social media and also just content creation platforms that are so accessible for teachers and students. So understanding what looks good, what photos look good, how to shoot video that's engaging, all of that has its place now because we all have tools that are easily accessible for it. So I think I've always had that love of photography and even video production. But it was in 2015 where it really all changed for me. And I was selected as an Apple Distinguished Educator. And I went down to Miami. I spent a week with a lot of Apple executives and other creatives on the Apple team and received incredible professional development. And at the end, they tasked all of us who were selected that year with returning to our communities and then using technology for some type of educational initiative. And I was already doing that, of course, as were most other Apple Distinguished Educators. So I came back to Milledgeville, but I wanted to do something that was beyond Milledgeville. And so I had this idea of creating a digital textbook on the state parks of Georgia that would then be freely distributed to teachers and students across the state for teaching history and ecology in their classrooms. And so I reached out to the Georgia DNR, got hooked up with them. They loved the idea. And so I started traveling to lots of different state parks. And since it was a digital textbook, it needed to have pictures, it needed to have video, it needed to be way beyond just text. And so I started taking a lot of pictures. I had permission to use a drone. And so I got a drone and started using that in the state parks. And I just as a byproduct of all of this, I was like, you know what, I'm going to start an Instagram account and post some of these drone photos, because this was in like the early days of pretty decent quality drone photography. And so I started uploading pictures of these different beautiful places in Georgia to my Instagram account, which was called Up Above Georgia. And it just took off because there just wasn't much else out there at the time. And so I remember like Wander North Georgia would share it a lot and Explore Georgia would share it a lot. And so I just built this following. And so the more people that were enjoying my photos, the more I felt like motivated. Hey, they want to see this. I'm going to get even more of it. And so I was just doing more and more photography. And then I started to kind of get a little tired of the drone thing because it's a little less personal and immersive. It's almost like a video game. You're just kind of flying this camera around. It's like science fiction. It's truly phenomenal. But after a while, I'm like, I've flown around a lot. I've taken a lot of pictures. I want to kind of be in the landscape again. And so I started to go back to my roots, and I bought some nicer equipment and started taking more traditional photos, posting them to my account, and people enjoyed those as well. And that led to a publisher reaching out to me called Globe Pequot, and they're based out of New England, and they wanted me to do a book. And so, do you want me to just keep talking about all of this? Is that good? I feel like I'm answering some of your other questions.
No, you're
here,
good.
But
keep going.
So yeah, Globe Pequot reached out to me and said, "Hey, we'd love for you to do a book, a coffee table book with your photos." And at first, when I got that email, I was like, this feels like, could this be a scam? Like, do you just get emails like this? Hey, we're a publisher. We want you to do a book. But I researched them and it was legit. And so I talked to the editor there. And when she realized I was also a professor, she was like, oh, so you know how to write as well? And I said, I do. And she said, well, we'd really love a travel book, not just a coffee table book. which was a much different undertaking because the coffee table book is just like I curate my favorite photos of Georgia and put some little captions with them. The travel book is 55, 60,000 words, understanding all these different places in Georgia, even places I'd never been to before. I mean, I traveled a lot for the state park project, but this was a different type of animal.
Right.
But I saw it as a really tremendous opportunity. And so I just kind of took it on, and I insisted that every photo in that book was from me. I didn't want them to use any stock imagery from Getty or Shutterstock or any of those. And so that put a lot more work on myself, but it also made it a really fun project that I felt like I owned from beginning to end. And so I photographed the entire book. I wrote the entire book. It was a lot of travel, a lot of time on the road, but I really got to know Georgia. And even though I'm from Tennessee, Georgia very much feels like home now. And so, so that book came out and it did really well, sold a lot of copies. It's in its second printing. And so then the publisher was like, do you want to do that coffee table book? Finally, I said, yes, absolutely. Because that's my passion, is just photography. And so then Naturally Georgia came out. So the first book was Georgia Discovered, second book, Naturally Georgia. And so that's how it all kind of started. The professor thing led to the photography thing, even though I've been a photographer, it feels like, since middle school.
Wow. Well, tell us how that turned into a show. How did you go from professor, photographer, and now like TV host? Like how or even like celebrity? How did you get there?
Yeah, that's an interesting story as well. The books were out. My social media following was doing well. I was enjoying it, and I'd connected through Instagram with somebody up in North Georgia. His name's Jason Clemens, and he owns Sunrise Grocery near Blairsville. And he'd seen some of my pictures because we have a cabin up near there. And he's like, hey, come by the store sometime. We'll talk photography, because he's an avid photographer as well. And so we hit it off. We have a similar style, a similar approach to our photography, and just like going someplace and not feeling rushed and just enjoying that space and soaking in the beauty and finding some images that maybe aren't obvious right away.
Right.
Like sometimes there's the grand scene, but there's also some other more intimate details that are very photogenic that you might not always look for right away. So we enjoyed that. And so over time, we're like, let's do a YouTube thing. A lot of photographers are doing a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
There's really not much in the Southeast, or at least in Georgia, that was like YouTube photography. And so we were like, let's fill that void. And so we started our YouTube channel and filmed episodes. And we had a different approach. I would film, he would film. We would each edit our own, put them on the same channel. And so viewers would see his approach, my approach, but we're at the same spot. And so they would, I think what it did was demonstrated how you can bring a group of photographers to one location, and each individual come away with a lot of different looking content.
Right.
And it's like the beauty and the subjectivity of photography. And so I think that was kind of cool, and we enjoyed it. But I do remember vividly, one day we were up on Hogpen Gap, which is where the Appalachian Trail crosses Richard Russell's scenic byway. And it was February, it was freezing cold. There was ice in the trees, ice on the ground. We're filming content, and I was just chilled to my core. I was so cold by the end. And so he drives me back down and drops me at our cabin, and I go inside, and all I think about is I need to warm up. I'm so cold. And so I turned on the fire, I poured a pretty strong glass of bourbon, and I turned on the television. And what came on was Georgia Outdoors. And it's been on forever. It is like one of the original Georgia PBS shows. And I was watching it. I've watched it for a long time. And I was sipping that bourbon. I think it all just kind of coalesced. And I had this idea pop in my head. I'm like, we could do something like this. Like we could take this formula, like this, the beauty of the outdoors, travel, but put a different spin on it. It's two photographers looking for beautiful locations. Like that is our primary purpose. And so I took that idea. I called Jason on the phone right then and told him my idea. And he's like, I love it. Let's do it. I'm in. And then I had a contact at Georgia, it's GPB, Georgia Public Broadcasting, in their education division from some work that I had done at the university. And so I sent her an email and I'm like, I have an idea for a TV show. Can I pitch it to you all? And it took like 3 days. And I was like, maybe they're not interested. And then I get an email back and she's like, sure, I'll set something up. And so she set up a Zoom call. This was during COVID. So she set up a Zoom call with their vice president of programming, her and myself. And I was going into it thinking, if they just say, shoot a pilot for us, I'll consider it a win. Like I just didn't want them to shoot down the idea because I really thought it had traction.
Right.
And I pitched it to them. I told them the idea, education, travel, beauty, fun, laid back, and they loved it. And they said, we've been trying to reach a bit of a younger demographic, and this is the type show that we think could do it. So bring us 5 episodes, which is half a season. And I actually have that footage somewhere because Jason was like, set up a camera and just record this. Because who knows, one day down the road, you might want to know and remember that conversation, how it all went down. So I have that somewhere on a hard drive. But I got off that call and I, called Jason. I'm like, we're making a TV show. And that's where it all started. And I had no idea what I was getting into, because I tell people this all the time. Making YouTube content is like here as far as complexity, and making television content like that has to meet broadcast standards and everything is like here as far as complexity and dotting your I's, crossing your T's, permitting, licensing, insurance, all of those things. Like I had no idea. And so that's how it all started. We didn't have a name for it yet. We just had a show. And so we started the planning process for filming the first season.
Wow. So, tell us some more about the show. Like what do y'all do on the show? What does it look like? You told us how it came about, but what does each day look like for the show?
So it's long days. Very rarely are we not up 30 minutes to an hour before sunrise. And so sometimes, depending on where we're filming, that can be 4:30 a.m.
Wow.
And almost every day, we're out until after the sun has set, a while afterwards. And so that can be 9:30, 10:30 at night. And so it's a very long day of filming, and it usually takes at least 2 or 3 days to film one episode. And so the approach is it's very run and gun. First season, it was just Jason and I. We were literally setting cameras up on tripods. Occasionally a friend would come with this and we'd be like, and this person had no idea how to run a camera. So we'd just be like, all right, hold this. And I'd set focus.
Oh my gosh.
And say, here's the record button. Just keep us centered.
Wow.
And hope that we could use it. Just to have some handheld stuff, because the static tripod shots were getting old. But then season 2, we had a cameraman, and that made a big difference. But it's just long days and a lot of beauty, but also it's very unpredictable. Like I always joke about how cooking shows are just like, they're so like stress-free because you can control all the conditions.
Right.
Maybe the recipe doesn't turn out, but everything else, you don't have to worry about rain, cold, like the sun never showing.
Right.
Like your car breaking down on the way to a shoot location, all of that. So it takes a lot of time to film an episode. And then also we line up experts because there's a very strong educational component to every episode as well. We want to educate the viewers about ecological significance, historical significance, conservation efforts, preservation efforts to help protect those places and make sure they're around for future generations to enjoy. Because again, we're focused on beauty. And there's a lot of beauty in the world, and we would never be able to capture all of it, but we want to show the audience just how special it is, because there's quite a few people that I hear from that can't get to these places ever, so they experience it through the show, and so that's kind of neat.
That's awesome. I really like how you talk about that. It's really powerful to be able to show someone the beauty of the world that can't get there.
Yeah,
that's really incredible. You do something really special with the music in your show. Talk to our audience a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So again, especially in season 1, like I was doing everything. Like if you watch a season 1 episode, the credits will scroll and it's just going to be my name over and over again. So I was like the producer, co-host, cameraman, drone operator, editor, all of that. And so I'd get these episodes and there would just be so much footage and you got to tell a story. And I liken video editing. I've really fallen in love with video editing and video production. I'm still a photographer in my heart, but video production to me is a really, really special art form because you're telling a story to an audience. And when you kind of compile all of those pieces, you end up with hundreds or thousands of pieces. And it's almost like a jigsaw puzzle. And with a jigsaw puzzle, there's one way to solve it. But with video, with a TV show or a film or anything like that, there's hundreds and hundreds of ways to solve it. And it's how you put all those pieces together. And if you put them together really, really well, it ends up being a story people want to watch. They enjoy it. It's a great experience from them from beginning to end. If you put it together poorly, they lose interest. Maybe they don't return to watch the show again.
Right.
Maybe it starts out strong and then it fizzles. So there's this spectrum of, kind of putting a show together in an order that keeps the viewer's interest from beginning to end. And I like that challenge. And I think a big piece to the show and to keep people interested from beginning to end is the music. And the music helps kind of emphasize emotions and helps with the storytelling. And there's a lot of like online subscription services, and I've used many of them for a lot of different projects. And so you get on there and there's just lots of music and you can sort by the type and the mood and the genre and all of that. But I had this idea while I was kind of working through some of that music to figure out what I wanted to use in the show. I was like, this is a Georgia show and there is a lot of talent in Georgia when it comes to music. I mean, Georgia has a strong pedigree when it comes to music. And so why not reach out and find musicians that have great work out there that just hasn't been discovered? And so I kind of harnessed the power of social media again. I put out a call and I said, I'm looking for music for this first season of a TV show that's going to air on GPB. And if you have any songs that you would be interested in, featuring on the show, please submit them to me. And I just started getting emails from musicians all over the state. And it put a lot of work on me because I had to listen to it all. And, I'd listen to the whole album because out of 12, 14 songs, there might be one or two that's going to work for like a nature travel show. But I listened to a lot of music and then I worked with the artists. Sometimes I had to work with their labels, but a lot of times they were just independent musicians working. They had a home studio. They'd play local coffee shops or bars, but they're passionate about it just like I'm passionate about photography. And so I just thought, hey, I've got this awesome platform now that's going to have a lot of people tuning in. Why not showcase some of the other talent in Georgia? And so that's kind of how it all started. But it's become such a huge piece to the show. I believe deep down it's a big reason why it's been picked up for national distribution on PBS. That musical component where it's a lot of different types of songs. There's blues, there's Southern rock, there's classical, there's Americana folk, country. There's even a touch of hip hop every once in a while in there. And so I think it's created a broader appeal for the show. And also it helps hammer home the emotions that we're feeling as we're traveling and experiencing things. If we're, really anxious about what the weather's going to do, if we're going up this brutal hike to the top of a mountain, how miserable we are. I mean, all of that. I think the music helps accentuate it.
I mean, it's powerful. Music is such a beautiful tool to really convey those emotions. Before we move on, I want to talk about your favorite memory from the show. What is the funniest memory that you have from filming Viewfinders?
Oh my gosh. There have been a lot of memorable moments. I mean, season 1 was memorable because we didn't really even know what we were doing.
Right.
And like Jason and I would just banter and talk about, he puts mayonnaise on sandwiches at like 7 a.m. with his eggs and cheese, and I just couldn't get over that. So we talked about that, and that became a whole thing. We got messages from audience members for a long time about mayo or no mayo before 10 a.m. because we had a big argument about that on camera. But then like in season 2, Jason couldn't do it anymore. And I didn't mention this earlier, but Jason's still a really good friend, but the show requires a tremendous investment in your time.
Right.
The travel and just the planning that goes into it. And with his store and new store that he was going to be opening, he just couldn't do it. And so when he stepped away, I had big shoes to fill. And so I had worked with Paul before when I was doing my first book. He's a great photographer out of Atlanta. He knows great spots in Atlanta to photograph. I needed those for the book. And so we connected. And he was the first person I thought of when Jason said he couldn't do it anymore. So I reached out to Paul, and he was super excited to come on to the show. And he's going to remain on the show. Like, he's all in. And so season 2, we were filming a lot and getting to know each other. And this really funny moment happened where he was being really nice, and he picked up my camera bag, but we were on a dock because we were filming all over the Georgia islands, like all these hidden islands that people don't know about. It's a really cool 2-part series that aired. Well, I did not attach my tripod as well as I should. And it was a nice tripod. And he picks that camera bag up, and it's gone into the water, never to be seen again. And so I still give him grief.
Did you try and go get it?
To this day. He was talking about it, but it was November. I mean, that water was cold. No, none of us had swimsuits. Like, he had no business jumping in the water. And then it was pretty deep. And like, we didn't have masks, and it's the Georgia coast. You can't even see anyway. So anyway, that tripod is long gone, but there's just lots of funny moments like that. We all cut up. There's a whole lot of content that could never air on PBS. So, and it's funny, this year I have an editor helping out, and so I'm sending him all of this footage.
Right.
But I don't know him. Like, he was provided to us by GPB, which is really nice of them. And so, but he's going to get to know us really well. He's going to know us a lot better than we know him. So many, many times we would just apologize. Like, our mics would be on and something would, I'm like, well, I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry you just had to listen to that. So anyway, we'll see how he works through all that footage.
So as we keep going, what are some tips that you have for aspiring photographers or videographers out there?
I think the biggest thing that I could recommend to anybody who's interested in it is, one, volume. Take a lot of pictures, shoot a lot of footage, and then go through it and see what you like and what you don't, and what you didn't, what you could have improved upon, and keep that in mind the next time you go out. And also find other people whose work you really like and study it. Learn from them. If they have a YouTube channel, if they have a blog, read it, watch it, learn from them. Not to necessarily copy what they do, but to kind of give you more techniques that can feed into the formation of your own style. Because I think what any really great photographer or videographer needs to do nowadays, because there's so many out there, is to develop your own style visually, as well as your editing style, if that's something that you do, so that you stand apart, so that you are unique in this field of creatives, because there are a lot of creatives. And especially nowadays, with everybody having a pretty nice camera and video camera in their pocket, there's a lot of content that gets out there. So how do you kind of rise above all of that? That your style, your approach, I think plays a big part in that.
As digital content and photography and videography become more and more of a more tangible and accessible career for a lot of people, do you believe that school is still a necessity for a lot of people?
That's a good question. And it's a really interesting question for me as a college professor.
Right, because you're a professor.
So I've had these talks with a lot of people. I think a college degree still has a lot of value, but I don't think it's essential like maybe it was thought of 20, 30, 40 years ago. Because there's just so many other ways an individual can go out and kind of carve out their career without that higher education experience. There's entrepreneurships, there's internships, there's terms, a lot of certification programs. I mean, there's just so many different ways that you can develop your skills, start your networking without going to college. But with that said, there's still tremendous value in the college experience because you meet so many people, and a lot of people go to college for one thing and then end up doing something completely different. And you might discover that while you're at college. You might take a certain class. You might meet a certain person. You might spend a lot of time during a study abroad program that really changes the trajectory of your life. And it could do so in a way that's very, very positive, and it might not have happened if you had not gone to college at all. So I do think there's still a lot of value, but I don't think it's necessary for success like maybe some people think it is.
I had someone tell me the other day that college is more about the experience and not about the degree, which, makes you think, she's like, no, you go to school for the degree. But really exactly what you're saying, the connections that you meet, the people that you learn from, and even just the life-changing information that you learn. I mean, you could go in for one thing, like you said, and come out with something completely different and realize you hated what you went in for.
Right.
Given that information, if you could do it all over, would you go back and get your degree?
I would, even though I'm not using my biology degree, but I've always had a strong interest in the outdoors and the natural world. And that biology degree gave me a strong foundation to appreciate where all that comes from and the underlying kind of mechanisms for that to be in place. And I am now, of course, doing things outside a lot. I'm making, a nice career out of it.
Right.
And so I think my experience at Indiana and then my other degrees that I got, which led me to the university, which led me to my distinguished educator, which led me to my project and my photography that got revitalized. Like if you trace it all back, I don't know if it would have happened the same way. And if I had tried to do the photography video thing when I was 22, 23, I don't know if I was in the right place mentally and like my skills and everything to stick with it. I might have been like, I'm just not there, and there's something else that's caught my eye. So I think it all happened when it needed to happen. Even though I'm a little kind of late to the game, I would love to be in like my late 30s right now with this show, getting the momentum it's getting. But that's okay. I'm not going to complain. I'm just going to ride it for as long as I can.
And you're getting great momentum right now.
Yes.
So you don't even have to worry about it.
Exactly.
So how have you learned to make a business with your art?
I am, and I tell people this all the time, I'm not a good businessman. I don't think about that. I'm bad with budgets, all of that. I am passionate about creativity and I believe in what I'm doing. And I think at the end of the day, that is the most important piece to anything that you do to make money. You have to believe in it and you have to believe in yourself, and you're going to get a lot of no's. I've gotten a lot of no's for sponsors over the years. Now that we're national, it's easier, but it's still, you get a lot of no's. So at the end of the day, if you believe in what it is you're doing, if you wake up wanting to do it and you stick with it, even through the tough times, I think you can find success. And with that success comes money, comes maybe a business if you want to run it that way. I run a business, but I don't think about it as much as running a business.
Right.
And I try to hire or bring in people to help me with the things that I'm not as good at so I can focus on the things that I am good at. I don't want to spread myself too thin. I think season 1, I did. Season 2, still did, but less so. Now this season, I feel like I'm able to focus more on the things that I'm really good at that I can contribute to the show to make it better.
I mean, that's awesome. As we're starting to wrap up, I have a few questions that we ask everyone that I want to hear your insights on. As you know, the show name is Make You Remarkable. And the question that we ask everyone is, what does that mean to you?
There's obviously a couple of ways it can be, probably more than a couple of ways that it can be interpreted. I think making your mark, and also the word remarkable, means it almost has a legacy connotation to it. So what are people going to remember you by when you were here? What did you do? And it can be so many different things. It can be anything from a television show to working at a company for a really long time and being loyal and working yourself up through the ranks and developing great relationships. But how are you going to leave a lasting mark in your community, with your family, and with whatever you decide to do with your life? And I think a big piece of that is, it goes back to what I just said. It needs to be something that you're passionate about and that you enjoy doing and that you just believe in. And I think that allows you to have the motivation and the ambition and the drive to leave your mark. And that can take many forms. And over the years, I'll probably think back to my time with my family more so than anything else. And so I want to make sure I leave my mark there as well as in the creative world.
And that's kind of going into my next question, but how have you, or how do you plan to make your remarkable?
I want to be a great husband and father first and foremost. That's very important to me. But beyond that, I want to continue to create content that people enjoy and learn from, and that represent how wonderful this world is in which we live. And it's real exciting now to be filming all over the country and going to beautiful places beyond Georgia. I feel like Georgia's beautiful, but there's a lot of other beauty out there. So it's fun making these episodes and seeing other beautiful places and bringing those places into people's living rooms. And so I think I'll leave a lasting mark in that regard as well.
And the last big question that we ask is, at Oconee State Bank, like, our primary goal is to create remarkable experiences for people. So how have you in your creative pursuits created remarkable experiences for people?
I've taken a lot of photos. I've shot a lot of video. I've been hired to do a lot of work. And to me, it's really, really gratifying when they're very pleased with, if it's a commissioned photo, if it's a video that I did for them, if it's an episode of the show that they watched. So I'm trying to kind of leave my mark in a lot of different ways in that regard. And I enjoy it a lot.
That's awesome. All right. So now that we're wrapping up, we go into this lightning round. So super fun questions, super fast, and short answer, super great. You ready?
I'm ready.
Puts down the LaCroix.
Put the drink down. Yep.
First and foremost, share a personal or professional best.
So far, 2 Emmy nominations. Hopefully at one point I'll be able to say Emmy win, but 2 Emmy nominations.
I mean, that's already incredible. That's so cool to me. What is the most impactful piece of advice you've ever been given?
It's cliche, but if you love and are passionate about what you do, you'll never really work. And I truly feel that now, especially with the show and my photography and my gallery and studio and just all the projects I'm working on. I feel like I'm not working. I feel like I'm just doing something I love.
I love that. What is something that you always tell your staff or your family? What is your mantra?
That's a good one. I try to encourage them to not worry about the small things too much. Look at the big picture. I need to work on that myself sometimes, but that's something that there's much bigger problems in the world than the small everyday life problems that we all experience. And I try to remind myself of that, as well as family and friends and others.
What is your favorite photo?
That is a really hard question to answer. But one that stands out is a photo I took of some cows, and there was snow falling, and they were all looking at the camera. It's really cropped in tight. The reason for that is twofold. One, it doesn't snow in Oconee much, and I really like the way it looks, and it doesn't look like it was taken in Oconee. But two, my dad was with me, and he's the one that started my love of photography, and he was there taking pictures with me that day. So to get that image that I really love, but also have him there with me, I'll remember that forever.
That's powerful. What is your favorite camera?
I have a Sony A1 that I love, and it is a workhorse. It shoots beautiful cinema footage, which has been in the show now for 3 seasons. And it also takes really great stills. So it's a do-it-all camera, and it saves a lot of weight and space, especially when we're flying places.
Best tip for photographers that are just now getting into photography?
Take lots and lots of photos and understand you're going to take a lot of bad ones. And even the best photographers in the world take lots of bad photos. You just don't see them.
And the most important one is balls or dogs?
Balls. All the way.
I knew you were going to say that.
It's been hard to look at that logo on your shirt this
I-
entire time.
When the second you said Tennessee, I was like, I'm dreading asking this question.
Balls all day.
Wow.
I almost wore orange to this, but I didn't want to alienate your viewers.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, last thing, go ahead and plug yourself. So what is your socials, your website, and any way for listeners to get in contact with you?
Yeah. So I have a gallery and studio in downtown Watkinsville, 16 North Main. You can find me there when I'm not out on shoots, which I am a lot. So it's always nice to reach out first. Socials, Instagram, Chris Greer Photography. The show is Viewfinders on TV. Facebook, Chris Greer Photo. But you can find me pretty easily there. It's all on my website, honestly, chrisgreerphotography.com. Links to socials, links to the show. To watch the show, you can watch it on the PBS streaming platform, which is a free download, just like Hulu, Netflix, all of those. We're filming season 3 right now. It'll be out in the spring. And it's locations all over the country, really beautiful locations. So we're very excited for that to air.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thanks so much for coming today. It was really awesome to get to hear your story.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for having me.